Welcome! In this video we will create a font picker control on a form with the PowerBasic Windows Compiler. This is the application as we left it at the end of the last video. We have a text box on screen to allow us to key in a title, and we have two colour control boxes, one to set the foreground colour and one to set the background colour. These work fairly well. What we want to add now is we want to add an additional control to allow us to select the font to be used. And this is going to appear to the right of the two colour boxes. Also, we can do some tidying up. The label control we have over here is no longer required, so the first thing we'll do is we'll remove that from the form. So if we hit F2 and go to the form designer, we will see our label control is hiding in here somewhere, label 2. So we'll just take that entire line out and it's gone. So we want to add a new control. Let's load up the libraries where our controls are going to go. And this is where our controls are. Now, since we're going to be adding a new button on the screen, we'll need an icon for it. So first thing to do is to create a new icon. So there we have the name of a new icon. I've created an icon we can use. So font icon is the icon we're going to be using on this new button. So we go back to where our dialog is actually created. What we had previously is we had a setup routine to create and place the colour picker. Now we're going to be doing something remarkably similar for the font. So what we did for the colour picker was we created a user-defined type that could be used to define the parameters we were actually going to be needing. So we'll do exactly the same for the font control. So we will create a new type. If we're following the same approach we took with the colour picker, we'll need much the same kind of variables. Certainly the first four. We will need a dialog handle. We will need the handle of the control to which we will place our new control beside. We will need a handle for the font picker control. And although we may not use it, we're going to create a handle which will point towards the control that we may want to apply a font to. Now I'm going to put this in, but this will be for possibly a later video. But we'll also need some information on the font that's actually been picked. We will want to display to the user in some manner the font that's actually been picked. So what I'm going to do today for this one is we're going to create an additional text box to the right of our new control, which is going to contain a piece of text that describes the font the user has in fact selected. Having created the type, we will now nip back to where our dialog is created, and we will create our local variable using the user-defined type we have just created. And we will make use of the prefix command again. The prefix command, for those who haven't seen it already, is a facility within PowerBasic that allows you to preface each code line with this piece of text. Saves a bit of typing and keeps all the code nice and together and easier to read. Now we're going to set up the values of our user-defined type. Picking up first the dialog handle. And our root control handle in this case is going to be the one previously, which in this case would be the background color picker control. So we'll just paste that one straight in. And we will have our painting handle to be the same as this one, although we're not actually going to be using this one. We want our control handle, which is the handle to the new button we're going to be adding. Now we'll need a new constant for this one, so we will create one which we will put up at the top of the code shortly. We'll call this one font title. We will want to have a default font number, and we'll make that 1. And the font picked is going to point towards the new control, which will be a text control that will display the font the user has actually selected. So we have two constants to create. We have this one and this one. So let's snip up to the top of the code and actually create these. So our font title we will make 5002, and we'll make the other one 5003. Done. So, having set the parameters for this, we will need to place the new font picker on the screen. Now, just like we did up here, where we called a routine to place the color picker, we're going to create a brand new routine which is going to place the font picker. And its single parameter will be our new user-defined type, control font parameters. So all we have to do now is to write the control. So we nip to our common Windows controls. This is where we placed our previous routines. We're going to place this one in here. And it's going to take our user-defined type, which we have previously created. In this case it's going to be font params as so this is going to do much the same kind of job as the color picker. So much the same kind of logic is going to kick in. We'll still need the local variables, so we'll just paste them in, save a bit of typing. Having done that, the next thing we did was we created a pointer, so we're going to do exactly the same job in here. Take these two lines of code and we'll put them in, and we will change it to use the font parameters. So what we did next was we started to set up the things like the resource icon and so on. So we're still in the same kind of logic. We will want a string to pick up the resource icon, so we'll put that one in. Now in this case there aren't two icons to be used for this one, there's only the one icon, so we will just put the value in of that, which in this case is going to be font icon. So the thing we did after that was to get the values of the location of the root control handle. So we need to use that again to work out where we're going to position this on screen. So having got these values, and these variables are exactly the same, we need to work out where to place it on screen. Now if we look at the code we did previously, what we did was we took the x coordinate that we got from the root and we added on the width of the control, which in this case was quite small. We added 5 just to make it a little to the right of that, and we basically placed an image button on the screen. Now there's nothing wrong with this logic for the font control. The exact same logic is going to work. The only difference being is we're going to create a callback function for the font rather than the colour. Is there anything else we need to change? No, that should be okay. Now, having done that, that will create the object on screen. What we want to do now, we want to do something a little different. What the previous control actually did was just place a button on the screen. In this case, we want to place two objects on the screen. We want to place the button, which we've just done. We want to create a text box into which we're going to put the font description. Basically just to describe to the user which font is the default font, and anything they do on the button to change that will be reflected in this new box. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get the size of our paint handle. So we start off with a dialog, which we've got as one of the parameters of the user-defined type. So we get the width and height of that object. Then we're going to add a little to it. Very much along the same lines as we did before. And then we want to add a text box. Now we're using the dialog handle again, since that's the control we want to place it on. We want to use the font picked as our handle, which is the handle to the text box. We're not putting the text in here initially, we'll put that in a moment. We want to position it on screen using our X and Y coordinates. We want to set its width. We want to set its height. And there are a number of parameters we want to put in which are fairly standard for a text box, which I will just paste in to save a bit of typing. Right, now that will add our text box on the screen slightly to the right of where our new font control actually is. Now at this point we want to show what the font description is. So we want to set the text in our new text box. Now, we want to set this value, but we need to know what to set the value to. Now, the user may pick a number of different fonts for use on our eventual graph control. So possibly the easiest way to do this is to store these in an array, in a font description array. And as we passed in the first handle to be number 1, the first element in that array, we'll want to set up our array. So we'll set the array up in itself in a moment, but what we'll do is we'll put the code in here, assuming the array's already been set up, and we'll call the array a global string font description. Just fold the code to make it a wee bit easier, and the element in the array is going to be coming from our user-defined type, and we're going to use the font number. Now you remember from when we actually set up the call in the dialog description, we're using a number 1 for the font number, so this is going to be the first element of the font description array. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to store the font actually, and again we're going to be using the prefix command. Now in here we want to store a number of pieces of information. We want to store the target control. Now I think we'll backtrack here because there's a few things we'll need to set up. The thing we haven't set up so far is we'll do the font description first. So up at the top here where we have our constants, we're going to set up a couple of new globals. We want a global array to store the font handles that the user has actually selected, and we'll also want an array, which we've already looked at, to set up to store the font descriptions. Right, okay, so that's two new global arrays. We will want to initialize these arrays at some point, so I think having a routine to actually do the initialization would be quite useful. So we will create a brand new function in here whose job it is to initialize this information. And we'll call this initialize fonts. Now the one thing we're not sure here is just how many fonts the user is going to be using. Now obviously from a design point of view you don't want to use too many fonts on a page because it does look rather messy, but we don't want to limit the user on how many fonts they want to actually set up. So what we'll do is we'll use an optional parameter here. Now I don't think we've actually used optional parameters before. Now an optional parameter is one that if you call the function without the parameter, the application will be quite happy about that. If you call it with a parameter, the application will also be happy with that. But you need to actually put something in the code to handle the fact to detect whether the parameter is missing or not and handle it accordingly. So the parameter we want to pass here is going to be the total number of fonts we want to prep the system for. And what you can do is you can put a bit of piece of code in here to test if the parameter or parameters are missing. Now if you're passing a number of parameters to a routine, if you have, for example, this, where you're passing two parameters, one long parameter and one optional long parameter. Now you can call this function with either one or two parameters, but once you've actually declared an optional, every parameter used after that must also be optional as well. You can't go from optional to non-optional because the program might have no idea what you're doing. But in this case we're only looking to pass one optional parameter. We're testing to see whether this value has been passed or not, and what we'll do is we'll create a couple of local variables, and what we will do, if the total fonts as a parameter is missing, we will set the max fonts to be equal to 20. Otherwise we will set the max fonts to be equal to the parameter that was actually passed, which is total fonts. That way if we don't pass a parameter, the maximum number of fonts is going to be 20. If we do pass a parameter, it will be different to that. So this will give the user total flexibility in how many fonts they want to actually use. Now that we've got that out of the way, we can effectively redimension our arrays using our max fonts variable, which will either be 20 if nothing's passed, or whatever number they did pass. Right, okay. Now, on the assumption that we want to create at least one font, which may need to be used on screen, we use the font command to basically prep the system for the new font. And we're going to take our default font as being Verdana. We will make it 12 point, and all the other parameters we will take as 0. And we will store the font number generated in long font. Now if you have a look in the help for fonts, you'll find in this case when you're creating a new font you have to give it the font name, the number of points which we've done, the style we've passed as 0, which is normal style, but you can have bold or italic or underline or strikeout or weeding. The next parameter is the character set, and again we're defaulting to the standard character set. The pitch, again we're going for 0, which is the default, which is not pitched. After that you then got escapement, which specifies the angle in tensor degrees between the character base and the x-axis. This allows you to print text on an angle as opposed to a straight line. Now since we're taking all the defaults in this one, and having got that set up, we want to then save the font handle into the array we've just prepared, which is font handles array. and we'll store the font description in the other array, and we will store it in the format of the font name with a dot, the type of font, the number of points, like so. Right, now this routine will need to be called near the beginning of the program. So if we go back to the main PB main function and have a look, and before we actually show the actual form, which is this one here, we will put in our call to initialize the fonts. Right, okay, now having done that, we can nip back to here, where we were. So now we're storing the font details. So first thing to do is to store the target control, what we're actually looking at. And the next one will be the painting handle. Though we may not be painting in this case. And we want to store the font description handle. Right, now having done that, we will come back to this in a moment. But we're going to have to create a new constant up at the top of our code. We have 4 numbers we're storing up here. These are the user numbers we're storing in the object 1 to 4. Now we need to store 2 additional ones since we're handling things for fonts now, and one of these is going to be the font handle, and we'll store that in slot 5. We have 8 slots to play with here, so we've got plenty of room. And one for the font description will make number 6. So this is pointing to the global arrays we've just created. Right, okay. Now having set those up, correct our spelling, we can now go back to where we were. So the last piece of work we want to do inside here, let's just take the bookmark off, is to store the font handle in the control that contains the font. We'll use the prefix command again, although we don't really need to use it at this point, it's quite handy. We may want to store other things later, if I can spell. So we're using the user-defined types dialog handle, and we want to store the painting handle, and we will use CTL font handle font number. Right, now that should be all we need in here. Let's just do a quick compile to see what we're missing. Yeah, we'll just change that to that one, keep it nice and short. Right, now that's fine. We haven't created the event handler, the callback function yet, so that's fine. So that's one of our next tasks. Now we'll populate this event handler in a moment, but I just want to make sure there's no other syntactical errors hiding in here that are going to come up surprises, which there are. Yes, we've missed out a constant we actually need. We need an additional one in here. Right, okay, I'll put that in place. Right, the program's quite happy. Now if we actually tried running that code now, let's see what we get on screen. There we go. We're fairly close. We haven't put the event handler in yet, but we've got the new font icon button sitting to the right of the color pickers. We have a text box which basically sits there quite happily and tells us which text at the moment has been set. The idea of clicking this box will be to change this. So we need to put our event handler in place now. So we go back to our event handler, which is currently completely empty. So the whole point of the event handler is to handle things like when the button is actually clicked. Now the same kind of logic we did down here will kick in. So we'll just copy a bit of this code to save a bit of typing, because this basically is common to everything. Basically we're picking up commands to say that the button in this case has been clicked. And then we just have to handle it. Once this button has been clicked, we will want to display the font selector. And PowerBasic has an inbuilt font selector. Now we'll position this roughly the middle of the screen-ish. And we will want to give it a default font. So we'll create a variable called default font, which we will prep up here. Now we'll get the default font in a moment. We will want to give it another variable for the number of points, the point size. So we'll create a variable for that too. We will want a style. And we will want flags. And we'll create a variable for that as well. Now we'll populate all these variables in a moment, but let's just finish off the work in here. And having got that, we want to get the values back that the user has actually picked. To another bunch of variables. And we will define these up at the top as well. So what we've got here then is a command, display font on the screen at a certain location with a certain number of values as being the default ones. Now, where are we going to get those from? Well, what I think we'll do is we will create another function up here that will get the font details that we have stored in those global arrays. And we'll need to pass it some parameters. And the first parameter we'll pass is we want the first element in the array, because we know we've prepped the first one. And we will pass in our values, which in this case are going to be these. So we'll need to create this function, so we'll nip up and we'll create a function to do this. Now, basically this first one is going to be the font number, and it will be a long. Now, the next one, I'm going to mark this with an O prefix to indicate the fact this is an output variable. It's not coming in, it's going out. And we'll call this to be the font name. And similarly with this one, we will call this one the point size. In this case, it's going to be a long as well. And the final one is also going to be a long, and it's going to be the style. One, two, three, four variables. 1, 2, 3, 4 variables. Right, okay. Now, having got that in, we will want to pick up things like the font name. So the font name in this case is going to be taken out of the font description. We stored the font description in this format. I put the dots in quite deliberately since we could use the parse command to basically slice up the values and pick it out. So we're going to use the parse command, but first of all let's put in the array details. We know it's coming from the font description array, and we know we're using the font number to find out which one. It just happens to be we know this is number 1. Now, if we did that, it would give us this entire string, and we're going to use the parse command to slice this up. The parse command is very powerful, and it takes 2 parameters, the first parameter being the delimiter. In this case we're looking for the dot, and the second parameter is the element. This is the first element, this is the second element, and this is the third element. So this will bring us back banana as the font name, which is exactly what we're after. Now I'm going to create a local variable to allow us to do some manipulation, and the next thing we're going to do is we want to pick up the point size. So we're going to do this in stages. We're going to use the same logic here. Oh, missed a bracket at the end there. We're going to use the same logic here, only we're going to be picking up the third parameter, which in this case would pick up this, in fact this, which contains a space at the front and pt at the end. strtemp equals right trim. We're going to use the right trim command on, we'll come back in strtemp, which is this, and we're going to trim it using the characters pt, which would basically give us this. And then if we use the trim around that, that should trim off the single space and leave us just with the 12. And then we can set our point size to be equal to the value of strtemp, which turns that from a string into a number, which in this case is 12. So we've got the font name and the point size, we just need the style now. So we'll use the strtemp command again, and we want to pick up the same information, but we want the second element this time, element number 2, which is this, regular. Now the value in here won't always be regular, but for initially it is going to be regular. So we want to use the select statement to basically turn that into a number. And our style is going to be 0. Now there are going to be quite a few other parameter types which we'll handle later. So for the moment we'll just make the style 0 for them all. We'll paste the rest in a bit. So we go back to where our font details are actually called. The other thing we haven't populated yet are the flags. Now I'm just going to put the default flags in for the moment, and we can tweak them as we go. So we've now got enough to actually display this on the screen. So let's try running that now and see what we've got. So there's our font button. If we click on our font button, we get the font selector coming up, which is defaulting to Verdana Regular 12 point, which is just what we were after. So at this point you can then go and select a different font, and you can see the sample on screen what it's going to look like. You could pick a different font entirely. You could bold it. Now when we hit OK, those values will be passed back to the event handler. Now we want to change the value inside this text box to reflect what the user's actually picked. So it's the next bit of code we need to put in, and that goes in here. So once the user's actually selected something, we want to pick it up. If the user hasn't selected anything, then the font name would actually be blank. So the best thing to do then is to test the value of the font name. So if we get this far, then the user has indeed selected. So in this case we're going to be using this variable to pick up the details of after, and we want it equal to the font name, which could be Verdana, plus a dot, space, and then we want something to get the font style. So we need a function for this one. Which we will create in a moment. Another dot after that one, because we're using the dot to be our delimitation of our string. And then we want to turn the number for the point size into a string, and then we'll just tack on to the end of it PT for points. Now, it's on the assumption we've actually got that string, we then need to put that string into the font description box, which sits to the right of the font control. So the first thing to do is to get the user value to pick out which control we're talking about. And the user slot we're looking for is this one, font description handle. And we're putting that to a value of long target, and we're going to use the control set text to long target, which is the handle to the control. Font string. Now the only thing we need to do now is to create this get font style function. So let's create that now. Now this one's going to return a string. And it's going to take in as a single parameter the style number. So we will create a local variable which is going to be the string we're going to return. And this is going to be no more than a select statement to turn numbers into strings. Now, as we saw earlier, the 0 value is actually regular. However, there are a number of other ones which we'll have to pick up. So if we go to our help, and if we go to display font, we will see down here in our style that 0 is effectively normal or regular, 1 is bold, 2 is italic, 4 is underline, and 8 is strikeout. However, these numbers do accumulate. If style happens to be a value of 3, that's equivalent to bold and italic. So obviously 5 would be underline and bold. So there are a number of different combinations we have to cope with in here. So if we go down here, we'll find that style number 1 is an easy one to do. We also have style number 2. Right up to number 8. Now we know that style number 1 is going to be bold. That's an easy one. Number 2 is going to be italic. Number 3, as we saw, was going to be a combination of bold and italic. Number 4 is straightforward underline. Number 5 is another combination style. Number 6, again, another combination style. Number 7 is a triple combination style. And number 8 is strikeout. Now, having created all of these, we should be in a position where our code should compile, unless we've missed something. Yes, we have. Long target has probably not been set up. Nope, we missed that one. What have we missed? Oh, we missed the control number. We put in the dialog handle, but we hadn't put in the control we're actually going to be getting the value from. So let's try running that now. Right, that's better. Okay, let's have a look at it. So we can click on the font selector. We can change our font to, for example, let's change it to Times New Roman. We'll make it bold and we'll make it 16 point, which it has changed in the sample here. If we click OK, it has put it in as Times New Roman. We're missing the bold part. It's not picking up the bold properly. Yep, it's our font description thing is not returning. We've missed something in our... Yes, the thing we've obviously missed is we haven't returned the value of the function. Yes, that does help. Having populated the value in the string, we were not returning it as the return value of the function. So if we run this now, We can then click on our font selector. We can then change it to Times New Roman. We can go bold, we can go 20 point, and it should display Times New Roman, bold, 20 point. Which it does. Perfect. So if we try it again, let's pick Strikeout. Verdana Strikeout. If we pick Italic and Strikeout, it's not handling that combination. Verdana Underline and bold. Let's try that. Yep, bold and underline's been picking out quite nicely. We may want to make that box a wee bit bigger because the length of the string isn't quite fitting in. So let's increase the size of our text box. So in our place font command, in here we place the image button and we also place the size of the text box. Now we did it originally basing on the size of the text box to be the size of the original text box. So what I think we will do is we will make it slightly bigger than that. Let's try 40 to it. Let's go for overkill. Right, that's a lot bigger, that's better. So now if we pick Times New Roman, which is a bigger bit of text, we want bold, and we want underline, we want 20 point. Yes, that fits in quite nicely, that was a good guess. So there we go, we have a font picker that can now be used to select the font you wish to use in other parts of the application. So as well as having a foreground text to be any colour you wish, you have a background text colour control, which you can use any custom colour you wish. Select that one, OK it. You now have a font selector you can use to select any font you wish as well. So, there we go. That's it for today. Thank you for watching.